All right, so welcome to week 8. This is the last week of the class, and so we've got a lot of important information to talk about, including the final exam, and if you have missing work, what do you do with that sort of thing. So let's get going. If I can get my slide to move. There we go. So this week we're only covering 2 sections. So we've got 6.1 and 6.2, which are about systems of equations and inequalities. So you're going to see this again when you get to pre-calc, which is MA141. And so you're getting your introduction, and then that's going to be the first topic that you start with in pre-calc once you do a little bit of review. So you will see this again. So systems and systems of equations, which are just lots of equations taken together, they are used a lot in anything that's data science. So anything that involves a lot of data, which a lot of things these days, like we have data all up the wazoo. So if you're analyzing a lot of data with lots of variables, lots of equations, you're trying to find where all of this is true. So let's say you're Facebook and you want to target an ad for single women who love cats and Uggs. Now this is a very simple equation, but you're going to have to, or a simple example, but you would have an equation for determining whether somebody's single, one for the fact they love cats, one for Uggs, one for single woman, their gender, and you can even get more detailed since there, and a lot of ads get even more detailed. So you're adding an equation with each thing that you're looking at. And so system of equations is you're solving where all of those things are true. So you're finding the people where all of those things are true about them. In business, a very simple system of equations is used with break-even points, where you have an equation for cost and an equation for profit, and you're looking for where your cost equals your profit. And so you're looking for where they intersect, and that way you can determine how much you need to sell to start making a profit, where you start making, or I should say cost and revenue, and then you start making a profit. You have comparisons. If you're trying to compare different things, like different loans, different salaries, you could write an equation. For example, let's say you have your job hunting and you have different salaries. One's maybe an hourly wage, maybe one is based off of commission, maybe one's just a flat salary. You can write an equation for each of those and then find where one is equal to the other or where one is more than the other. Like how many hours would you have to work for the hourly wage to be you're getting paid more than maybe the salary, or if you have something commission, how much would you have to sell in order to make more than what you would get on a salary? So you can do comparisons like that. In economics, anything with supply and demand, you can have an equation for supply, an equation for demand, and then you're looking for where the supply is equal to the demand. So a lot of things where you're looking for multiple things and you're trying to find where they are true. That is what we do with systems of equations. So what you have to know for this week is basically how to solve linear and quadratic equations and how to graph. That's basically it. So it's a nice kind of break, or a nice way to end the class with something that's not going to be a lot of work or cover a lot of material, so that way you can focus on your final exam. So this week you have your discussion, your ungraded practice assignment, and I should say final exam, not quiz. It is not a quiz. It is very different from a quiz. That's the final. But notice there is no graded assignment. And that's because we want you to focus on studying for the final. Plus, you're going to have an assignment on it if you go on a pre-calc. So you don't really need to be tested on it or, do it twice, because we're introducing you to the concept. And there will be one question on the final on systems, but you don't need a whole assignment on it. So you have only your discussion, your ungraded practice assignment, and then your final. So let's talk about the discussion. And we actually have sort of like 2 discussion forums. So it's a little interesting, a little different. So you have discussion forum 1, which is the graded discussion forum. That's going to be like the first one you see. And this is a reflection on what you needed, like how the class has gone and just looking forward. So what skills do you think this course has helped you develop? And these could be skills like critical thinking, time management, note taking. They don't have to be algebra skills, but it could be algebra skills. It'd be awesome if it's algebra skills. Do you see these skills being beneficial in other courses or in your daily life? How do you think algebra, either the skills or the concepts, can be applied in your career? What topic did you find the most interesting and why? What advice would you give to a student starting the class next term? What classes are you taking next term? Maybe you'll find somebody that you are going to be in the same class with and you guys can form a study group. So it's kind of a reflection on the group and, a way to end the class on a good note, looking forward on how this is going to help you going forward. Then the second forum is an ungraded discussion forum. So if you post there, you will not get a grade for it. But that is corresponded with the end of course survey. So there is a link to the end of course survey that you would take. Please take it so that we can get feedback. And then after completing your survey, share what you feel is the most valuable suggestion for improvement. Share only what you're comfortable with and ensure that you place the suggestion in the survey comment section. So it's in the survey and then it's also in the discussion. Now make sure that these are constructive, that these are actually going to be helpful. We don't want to just see complaints without suggestions to go with it for like, okay, this is what I didn't like, but here's what you could do instead. So if you want to give suggestions, things that we can actually investigate on whether that's a good option or not. So make sure they're constructive, anything that will help you and then help others going forward taking this class. So next we have the assignments. So we've got our ungraded practice assignment. So this is practice problems from chapter 6, those 2 sections. Because you are going to have one question on the final exam covering this material, I strongly recommend that you do these practice problems because otherwise you won't have any experience with how to solve the problem on the final. So there's not a lot of problems here. I believe it looks like there's 11 of them. So not a lot of problems, but it's enough to give you some experience so that you can do that question on the final. And now let's talk about the final exam. So your final exam is like the midterm, so it's twice as long as a quiz. So you have 20 multiple choice questions. And because it's twice as long, you have twice the time, so that's 2 hours long, and you must complete it in one sitting. And you are required to submit your work to the Dropbox. So make sure that you're writing down your work on a paper as you work through the problems, and then you are taking a picture or scanning it and then submitting it to the final exam Dropbox after that. And that's how you can get partial credit, because you don't want to end up with no partial credit because that could be really harmful. The final exam is worth 15%. And if you make a small mistake, that's the difference between getting 0 points and like 7.5 points, which is, that's a big difference. So you're going to want to definitely make sure that you submit your work. It's required. That's how you get partial credit. So the topics that are covered are things week 4 through week 8 with only one question on week 8 material. So you have 3 questions on functions concerning their notation, doing some sort of function combination, like maybe you're multiplying functions together, or maybe you're doing it function composition where you're plugging one function into another. And then you're also finding the inverse of a function. Then you have 5 questions on graphs and equations, finding domain, finding the zeros, finding the asymptotes, finding the intercepts, and then figuring out the transformations. There is a graphing problem, so you can use Desmos.com for that, and analyzing graphs, so that would help you out. You have 3 questions where you have to write models. So one is a polynomial model, one is a model of variation, and then one is an exponential model. You have a question on using the properties of logarithms. And then you have 3 solving problems. So you're going to have to solve an exponential, a logarithmic, and a system. And then you have a question on synthetic division. So that should add up to 20, because I don't believe we have any repeats here. So let's see, that's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. What are the missing questions? I think there might be more than one graphing question. So you might have 3 or 4 graphing questions, and that I think that's where the other 3 questions are coming from. So I think you might have 4 because we did a lot of graphing. So, but everything else, there should be about 1 question on each of those. So the top 5 most difficult topics based on previous terms. The first one is writing exponential models, and that's because you're taking a word problem, writing an equation, plus it's something that you just learned, so you haven't had a lot of time to practice it yet. Function combinations, so that was from week 4. The hardest part of that is the function composition, where you're plugging a function into another, so you're going to want to take some extra time to study that and practice. Variation, that's another word problem where you have to create the equation, so that's another difficult part for people. Solving systems, so that's what you're learning this week, and I think that one's usually low scoring only because people don't do the practice problems. So if you do the practice problems, you should be fine doing the solving of the system. And then the last one is function transformations. So that was another week 4 where you have an equation and you're trying to figure out what happened to that equation to get the other equation, whether it was shifted left or right, up and down, multiplied by a number. So that's the other thing that is difficult for people. And using Desmos and graphing should help you figure that out. So to study for not the quiz, but to study for the final, you want to review your assignments for weeks 4 through 7 so you can make sure you know how to do each problem, you understand your mistakes, and try to find practice problems out of the textbook that are similar to those, because they will be similar to what you get on the final. Review your quizzes from weeks 5 through 7. Again, those questions are going to be similar. You may even end up with some of the same questions. So definitely review your quizzes. Make sure you know how to do the problems you got wrong. Do lots of practice problems. Do problems from the cumulative tests that are in the end of various chapters. The textbook's website has practice tests as well, so I'd recommend working through those. And you can do practice problems from IXL or Khan Academy as well. So the best way to study is to practice. Because if you just read the material, you're not going to be successful. The other thing, when you're taking something like this, make sure you do all the easy ones first. Make sure your notes are organized and it's easy to find things so that you don't waste time searching your notes for something. Take your time, because a lot of people make small errors, then their answer's not on the multiple choice and they keep trying. If you take your time, you're less likely to make those errors, and then you don't have to keep redoing the problem to find where your error was. So I would take your time. You can even set a timer at like the 1.5 hour mark, so that you know you have a half hour left, and then judge, okay, how many questions do I have left, and decide what to focus on from there. You should have enough time if you have practiced, if your notes are organized, and if you find yourself spending a lot of time on a problem, move on, go back to it later. You don't want to waste your time all on one problem, so you want to make sure you have a chance to do everything. So I think that's all I can think of, some tips for studying for the final and taking the final exam. So let's take a look at the suggested schedule for this week. So because this is the last week, this is the last time you can turn in any work and turn in late work. So there's only 2 sections, so I really recommend that you spend the bulk of your time studying. So I have, I kind of broke it down, different things that you can study, as well as if your teacher allows resubmissions, do resubmissions. Even if they don't, working on those assignments will help you learn the material and study for the final. If you have missing work, definitely work on missing work and get that in, because the last day to turn in any work is the last day of the class. So take that extra time to study and finish any missing work, or do resubmissions if you've been allowed to do a resubmission. So End of the course. This is very, very important. So the course ends Tuesday, November 5th at 11:59 p.m. Central Time. So you need to make sure that if you're in a different time zone, you've done the conversion so you know what time it will end at your time. Once 11:59 p.m. hits, you'll have no access to the course. What that means is if you are in the middle of the final exam, you will lose access to the rest of the final exam. So you need to make sure that you start your final with more than 2 hours to spare before the end of the course. There is no work accepted after the course closes. So you can't email assignments. You're not going to be able to submit it in Blackboard. So once the course closes, that is the final due date for all work. Final grades are submitted by Friday, and then they should be up in the system by Saturday. If you don't know how to see your final grades, ask your student advisor. They can show you and walk you through the process. No grades are going to be emailed out, so you will have to wait till Saturday to see what your grades are. If you have requested an incomplete, that will begin November 10th and go for 2 weeks, 14 days. To qualify, you need to have completed at least 50% of the work and have extenuating circumstances. Requests for an incomplete must include documentation of those extenuating circumstances and a list of your missing work and due dates for when you are going to turn those in within that 2-week period. So that needs to then go to your instructor, and then your instructor will let you know whether they approve the incomplete or not. And for those, hopefully you are all going to the next term unless you're graduating. Your next term starts November 13th. So you do have some time. You have like a little break before your next term starts. So you can use that break to start taking a look at the next class, making sure you have all the material you need for the next class, making sure you have access to your textbook, all of that good stuff. So that's all I have for you guys. If you have any questions, this is basically the last week you can ask it, and then you will be moving on. So if it's anything regarding your grade, your missing work, that all has to go to your instructor. But if it's questions about the content, you can email me, give me a call. And I hope you guys have a great last week of class, and have fun going forward. So it's been good working with you, doing these sessions to get you to help you know what you need to do for the week and plan out your time and all of that. So this has been fun, and I hope you guys have a great day.